London, 1815. Marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more, declared Lady Cordelia Pemberton to her reflection as her lady's maid arranged her hair for the evening's ball. One must approach it with the same calculation one would use when purchasing property. The young woman in the mirror, blessed with chestnut curls and eyes the color of summer skies, had repeated this mantra since her 16th birthday. Now, 3 years later, with her hand promised to the Duke of Harrowmont, she had achieved exactly what she had been raised to want: a match of impeccable standing, substantial wealth, and undeniable prestige. If only the Duke himself were not so thoroughly disagreeable. "Miss, your mother wishes to remind you that His Grace will be attending tonight," her maid said, placing the final pearl-tip pin. "She suggests you wear the blue silk to match your betrothal ring." Cordelia glanced at the sapphire weighing down her finger, cold, ostentatious, and about as subtle as the man who had placed it there. At 39, Duke Reginald Harrington was known throughout London society for his cutting remarks, exacting standards, and utter disinterest in frivolities like dancing or pleasant conversation. He had declared her acceptables upon their introduction and proceeded to negotiate with her father as though she were a particularly promising brood mare. "The blue will do," Cordelia replied, straightening her shoulders. One must look the part of a future duchess, after all. Later, as the Pembertons' carriage rolled toward Almack's assembly rooms, Cordelia's mother prattled on about the wedding preparations while her father dozed in the corner. The April evening was unseasonably warm, making the confines of the carriage stifling. "Do try to smile, Cordelia," Lady Pemberton urged. "Your countenance has been positively funereal these past weeks. Any young lady would be ecstatic to make such a match." "Yes, mother," Cordelia replied automatically. "I am the envy of all England, I'm sure." The truth, which Cordelia barely admitted even to herself, was that while she had always known marriage was a practical affair, she had harbored a secret, foolish hope for something more. Perhaps not the wild passion described in the novels she kept hidden beneath her mattress, but at least a husband who might occasionally smile in her presence. The ballroom was already crowded when they arrived, a swirl of silks and satins beneath crystal chandeliers. Cordelia moved through the practiced motions of greeting acquaintances, accepting congratulations on her engagement, and pretending not to notice the pitying glances that followed. "Lady Cordelia," came a familiar voice, precise and cool as winter frost. "You look well." Duke Reginald stood before her, his tall frame rigid, his face set in its customary expression of mild dissatisfaction. He extended his hand, and she placed her gloved fingers in his with practiced grace. "Your Grace," she curtsied. "How kind of you to say so." "I merely state facts," he replied. "I have arranged with the patronesses for our first dance. The supper dance, I believe. Until then, I have business to discuss with Lord Whitmore." With a curt nod, he departed, leaving Cordelia to wonder, not for the first time, how she would survive decades of such scintillating conversation. She was contemplating the tragic limitations of her dance card when a deep, amused voice spoke from behind her. "My dear future sister-in-law, you look as though you're calculating how quickly you might escape through the nearest window." Cordelia turned to find herself facing a man who, though unmistakably related to the Duke, seemed his opposite in every way that mattered. Where Reginald was all sharp angles and severity, this man's features held warmth and humor. His eyes, the same striking grey as his brother's, crinkled at the corners with obvious mischief. "Lord Zachary Harrington," he bowed with a flourish. "Recently returned from the continent and entirely at your service." Cordelia remembered hearing that the Duke had a younger brother who had spent the past 3 years abroad. The rumor suggested he had been exiled for some scandalous behavior, though the precise nature of his transgressions varied depending on who was gossiping. "I was merely contemplating the architecture," she replied primly. These columns are particularly fascinating. Indeed? How curious, for you were facing the window panes at the time. His grin widened. Come now, Lady Cordelia. If we are to be family, we might at least be honest with one another. You were plotting escape routes. I recognize the expression well, having worn it myself at countless society functions. Against her better judgment, Cordelia found her lips curving upward. Perhaps I was considering the possibility of a sudden headache. A classic strategy. Though I prefer the urgent correspondence, excuse myself. Lord Zachary glanced around the room. My brother appears occupied. Might I claim the next dance? For familial harmony, of course. Of course, Cordelia agreed, surprised by her own eagerness. Though I'm not certain your brother would approve. All the more reason to proceed, wouldn't you agree? As Lord Zachary led her to the dance floor, Cordelia felt a flutter of something dangerously like anticipation. The orchestra struck up a country dance, and they took their places in the formation. I understand congratulations are in order, he said as they circled one another. Though I must confess, I was rather surprised to learn of my brother's engagement. He has long maintained that marriage was a tedious obligation he would postpone as long as possible. How flattering, Cordelia remarked dryly. I shall treasure the knowledge that I am merely an obligation. Forgive my bluntness, Lord Zachary replied, genuine regret crossing his features. I simply meant, well, Reginald is not known for his romantic sensibilities. Neither am I, Lord Zachary. Marriage is a practical affair, after all. His eyes studied her face. Is that what you truly believe? The directness of his gaze was unsettling. It is what every sensible person believes. Then I must be thoroughly senseless, he replied cheerfully as they joined hands for a promenade. For I have always held that marriage, if entered into at all, should be a matter of mutual affection at the very least. Preferably accompanied by passion, respect, and a certain amount of laughter. Cordelia nearly missed a step. You sound like a character from a novel, sir. And you sound like someone reciting lines you've been taught to speak, he countered, his voice gentle despite the challenging words. Tell me, Lady Cordelia, do you and my brother share many interests? Do you find his company stimulating? Does your heart beat faster when he enters a room? Heat rose to her cheeks. Those are highly improper questions. Undoubtedly. But are they not also important ones? Before she could formulate a response, the dance brought them to separate sides of the formation. By the time they came together again, Cordelia had composed herself. Your brother is a duke, she said with finality. He is wealthy, respected, and offers security. Those are the only questions that matter in a practical world. Lord Zachary's expression grew serious. And if the world were not practical? If you could choose based on your heart rather than your head? Then I would be a fool, Cordelia replied, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. The dance ended, and Lord Zachary bowed over her hand. Thank you for indulging me, Lady Cordelia. I hope we might continue our conversation another time. As he walked away, Cordelia was left with the unsettling feeling that something fundamental had shifted beneath her feet. The following week brought a flurry of social engagements, each seemingly designed to showcase Cordelia as the Duke's intended. At a musical soirée, she sat beside Reginald, acutely aware of his critical gaze upon every performer. The second violinist is embarrassingly untrained, he murmured during a particularly lovely passage. And Miss Thornfield's soprano is adequate at best. I find her interpretation quite moving, Cordelia ventured. The Duke's eyebrow arched. Emotion is no substitute for technical precision. From her other side came a whispered comment, though technical precision without emotion is merely mathematics set to rhythm. Lord Zachary had materialized in the seat beside her, his presence both unexpected and oddly comforting. The Duke acknowledged his brother with a curt nod before returning his attention to the performers. "You appear at the most unexpected moments, Lord Zachary," Cordelia whispered. "A talent I cultivated in childhood," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. "Particularly useful when escaping Reginald's lectures on proper deportment." A laugh escaped her before she could prevent it, drawing a disapproving glance from the Duke. "Perhaps you might control your frivolity, Lady Cordelia," Reginald said coldly. "This is not a common theatre." Embarrassment flooded her, but Lord Zachary spoke before she could apologize. "My fault entirely, brother. I was relating an amusing incident from Lady Jersey's rout last evening." His smile remained easy, though something hardened in his eyes. "Lady Cordelia was merely being polite in acknowledging my poor attempt at wit." The Duke sniffed but said nothing more. As the music continued, Cordelia found herself hyper-aware of Lord Zachary beside her, the subtle scent of sandalwood that clung to his coat, the way his fingers tapped lightly against his knee in time with the melody, the warmth that seemed to radiate from him. When the performance concluded, the Duke rose immediately. "I must speak with Lord Liverpool about tomorrow's vote. Lady Cordelia, I shall call upon you tomorrow afternoon to discuss the settlement details." He departed without waiting for her response, leaving her with Lord Zachary. "My brother has all the romantic finesse of a ledger book," Lord Zachary observed, offering his arm to escort her to the refreshment table. "Has he ever complimented your eyes? Brought you flowers? Written you appalling poetry?" "I would find such gestures unnecessary," Cordelia replied, though she couldn't help wondering what it might be like to receive them. "Unnecessary, perhaps. But pleasant nonetheless, I should think." He handed her a cup of punch. "Tell me something, Lady Cordelia. What do you enjoy? Besides contemplating escape routes at social gatherings, that is." The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her preferences in years, least of all her betrothed. "I enjoy reading," she admitted. "And walking in the gardens at dawn, before anyone else is about. And sometimes—" She hesitated, then continued more quietly, "sometimes I compose music. Simple pieces, nothing of consequence." Lord Zachary's face brightened. "You play? And compose as well? How extraordinary! You must show me your work someday." "Oh, I couldn't possibly. They're merely trifles." "I doubt anything you create could be considered a trifle," he said with such sincerity that her cheeks warmed. "Would you permit me to call upon you tomorrow? Perhaps you might play for me." "The Duke is calling tomorrow," she reminded him. "To discuss settlements." Something passed across his face, determination, perhaps, or resolve. "The morning, then. Before my brother arrives with his contracts and calculations." Cordelia knew she should refuse. Entertaining her fiancé's brother alone would be considered forward at best, improper at worst. Yet she found herself nodding. "Yes," she said. "I should like that very much." The following morning, Cordelia sat at the pianoforte in her family's drawing room, fingers trembling slightly as she played one of her compositions for Lord Zachary. The piece was wistful, with moments of brightness woven through a melancholic theme. He sat nearby, eyes closed, listening with complete absorption. When the final notes faded, he remained silent for so long that Cordelia began to regret her decision to share something so personal. "I apologize for," she began. "It was beautiful," he interrupted, opening his eyes. "Truly beautiful. It felt like longing." like hoping for something just beyond reach. Cordelia's breath caught. He had understood exactly what she had felt while composing the piece, though she had never articulated it even to herself. "Thank you," she said simply. Lord Zachary rose and moved to stand beside the pianoforte. "Lady Cordelia, I must speak frankly. My return to England was not merely a whim. When I learned of my brother's engagement, I was curious about the woman who had finally secured his interest." "His interest in my father's shipping investments, you mean," she said before she could stop herself. His lips curved. "Indeed. Though I expected to find some cold, calculating creature who complemented Reginald's temperament. Instead, I discovered," he gestured toward the pianoforte, "this. A woman of depth and feeling, trapped in a betrothal to a man incapable of appreciating either." "Lord Zachary, Zach," he corrected gently. "My friends call me Zach." "I'm not certain we should be friends," Cordelia said, though the words lacked conviction. "No," he agreed, his gaze intensifying. "I find I do not wish for friendship at all." The import of his words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Before Cordelia could respond, the drawing-room door opened to admit her mother and the butler. "The Duke of Harrowmont has arrived, my lady," the butler announced. Lady Pemberton's eyes widened at the sight of Lord Zachary. "Lord Zachary! We were not expecting you today." "I imposed upon Lady Cordelia to hear her play," he explained smoothly. "She is remarkably talented." "How or kind," Lady Pemberton said uncertainly. "Though perhaps unexpected." "The Duke is in the blue salon, Cordelia. You should not keep him waiting." "Of course, mother." Cordelia rose, straightening her morning dress. "Thank you for your appreciation of my music, Lord Zachary." "The pleasure was entirely mine," he replied, his eyes conveying much more than his words. "Until next time, Lady Cordelia." As she made her way to meet her betrothed, Cordelia felt as though she stood at the edge of a precipice, uncertain whether she wished to step back to safety or leap into the unknown. The Duke's visit proceeded with mechanical precision. Discussions of properties, allowances, and expectations filled an hour that seemed to stretch into eternity. Throughout, Cordelia found her thoughts drifting to the morning's encounter with Lord Zachary, the way he had truly listened, truly seen her. "I trust these arrangements meet with your approval, Lady Cordelia," the Duke asked, drawing her attention back to the documents before them. "Yes, of course, Your Grace." "Excellent. The settlement shall be finalized next week." He studied her with clinical detachment. "I have also decided that we shall move the wedding date forward. The 1st of June should be suitable." Cordelia's stomach dropped. "But that is barely 6 weeks away. I thought we had agreed upon September." "Circumstances have changed. I require an heir sooner rather than later, and there is no sense in prolonged delays." His tone made it clear that her opinion on the matter was irrelevant. "Your mother assures me that preparations can be adjusted accordingly." In that moment, the reality of her future crashed upon Cordelia with devastating clarity. This man, this cold, demanding man, would be her husband. He would dictate her schedule, control her finances, and expect her to bear his children. And she would never hear warmth in his voice or see genuine interest in his eyes. "As you wish, Your Grace," she managed to say, though something inside her rebelled at the words. That evening, unable to sleep, Cordelia slipped from her bed and moved to the window seat overlooking the garden. The full moon cast silver light across the carefully manicured lawns, making the familiar landscape seem otherworldly. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to acknowledge the hollow ache that had taken residence beneath her ribs. She had been so determined to be practical, to do what was expected, that she had nearly convinced herself it was what she wanted. But Lord Zachary's questions had cracked the careful facade she had constructed. Did her heart beat faster when the Duke entered a room? No, it constricted with anxiety. Did she find his company stimulating? Only in the way one might find a debate with a stern headmaster stimulating, an exercise in avoiding missteps. Did they share interests? None that she had discovered. And yet, in just a handful of encounters, Zachary Harrington had seen more of her true self than her betrothed had bothered to glimpse in months of courtship. Foolish thoughts, she whispered to the moonlight. Utterly foolish. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Cordelia was fitted for gowns, consulted on menu selections, and paraded before society as the future Duchess of Harrowmont. Through it all, she maintained the serene facade expected of her, though inside, doubts multiplied like weeds after spring rain. Lord Zachary appeared at every social function, somehow always managing to secure a few moments of private conversation. At Lady Winthrop's garden party, he found her beside the reflecting pool. "You look pale," he said without preamble. "Are you unwell?" "Merely tired," she replied. Wedding preparations are rather exhausting, especially when one's heart isn't in them. Cordelia glanced around nervously. "You shouldn't say such things." "Why not?" "It's the truth." He stepped closer. "Cordelia, forgive my familiarity, you cannot marry him. You know this as well as I do." "I have given my word," she said, though the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "The settlements are being drawn up. Invitations have been sent. It is too late for second thoughts." "It is never too late to avoid a lifetime of misery," Zachary countered. "Do you think my brother will suddenly develop an appreciation for music? For literature? For you? I do not expect romance, Lord Zachary." "But you deserve it," he said fiercely. "You deserve someone who treasures your mind, your talent, your spirit. Someone who looks at you and sees not an advantageous match but a miraculous one." The raw emotion in his voice left her momentarily speechless. Before she could recover, he continued, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "I have watched you these past weeks, Cordelia. I have seen how you come alive when discussing books or music, how you light up when you forget yourself enough to laugh freely. And I have seen how that light dims whenever my brother approaches." "What would you have me do?" she asked, her own voice barely audible. "Break the engagement? Bring scandal upon my family? Become a cautionary tale for young ladies throughout London?" "I would have you choose happiness," he said simply. "I would have you choose me." The words hung in the fragrant air between them, impossible and intoxicating. "You cannot mean that," she whispered. "I have never meant anything more sincerely." His grey eyes, so like his brother's yet so different, held hers. "I returned from the continent with no intention beyond meeting my brother's betrothed. I could never have anticipated finding a woman who would capture my heart so completely." A throat cleared behind them, and they turned to find the Duke himself standing a few paces away, his expression thunderous. "Lady Cordelia," he said coldly, "your mother is looking for you. Something about floral arrangements requiring your attention." "Yes, of course," she said, dropping into a hasty curtsy. "Excuse me, gentlemen." As she hurried away, she heard the Duke addressing his brother in low, furious tones. Fear gripped her, not for herself, but for Zachary. She had no illusions about the Duke's power or his willingness to use it against those who crossed him. That evening, a note was delivered to her room. "Meet me in the conservatory at Harrowmont House tomorrow at noon. I must speak with you urgently." Cordelia knew she should ignore the request. Going alone to the Duke's residence to meet his brother secretly was beyond improper, it was potentially ruinous. And yet, the thought of never speaking privately with Zachary again was somehow worse than the risk of discovery. The following day, she informed her mother she was visiting her friend Lady Eleanor, then directed her coachman to Harrowmont House instead. The massive stone mansion in Mayfair seemed to glower at her as she approached, its grandeur intimidating rather than welcoming. "I am expected by Lord Zachary," she told the butler, maintaining a confidence she did not feel. "Yes, my lady. His lordship awaits you in the conservatory." The glass-enclosed space at the rear of the house was filled with exotic plants and flooded with spring sunshine. Lord Zachary stood among the greenery, his expression brightening at her arrival. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I feared you might think better of it." "I nearly did," she admitted. "It was most improper of you to invite me here." "Desperate circumstances call for desperate measures," he replied. "My brother has declared his intention to send me back to the continent." "Immediately." Cordelia's heart sank. "Because of our conversation yesterday?" "Partly. Though he claims it is a diplomatic mission of vital importance." Zachary's smile held no humor. "He intends that I should depart tomorrow, not to return until after the wedding." "Convenient timing, wouldn't you agree?" "He knows," Cordelia whispered. "He suspects your feelings." "Or yours," Zachary countered. "Reginald may be cold, but he is not unobservant. He has seen the way you look at me when you think no one notices." Heat rose to her cheeks. Had she been so transparent? "It changes nothing. I am still betrothed to him." "It changes everything," Zachary insisted, closing the distance between them. "Cordelia, I love you. I believe you have feelings for me as well. Tell me I'm wrong, and I shall depart without another word on the matter." She opened her mouth to deny it, to say what propriety demanded, but the word stuck in her throat. How could she lie when the truth pounded in her chest with every heartbeat? "You are not wrong," she admitted finally, the confession both terrifying and liberating. "But what does it matter? I cannot break my engagement without causing a scandal that would destroy my family's standing. My father's business connections, my sister's prospects, all would be ruined." "What if there were another way?" Zachary asked, taking her hands in his. "What if my brother could be persuaded to release you from the engagement without scandal?" "Impossible," she said firmly. "The Duke does not relinquish what he considers his." "Unless he believes it was his idea," came a third voice. They turned to find the Duke himself standing in the doorway of the conservatory, his expression unreadable. "Your Grace," Cordelia gasped, mortification washing over her. "This is not—" "Please do not insult my intelligence with denials, Lady Cordelia," he interrupted. "I have suspected my brother's infatuation for some time. Your reciprocal feelings became apparent at Lady Winthrop's gathering." Zachary stepped protectively in front of Cordelia. "Brother, the fault is entirely mine. I pursued Lady Cordelia knowing of your engagement." "Yes, you did," the Duke agreed, entering the conservatory fully. "Most dishonorable of you. Though not entirely surprising, given your history of impulsive behavior. If you have come to call me out, Reginald, I would prefer we discuss the matter privately," Zachary said stiffly. To their astonishment, the Duke laughed, a short, dry sound utterly devoid of humor. "Call you out? Over a woman?" He shook his head. "I have no intention of engaging in such melodrama. No, I have come to suggest a more practical solution to our predicament." "Predicament?" Cordelia echoed. "Indeed." The Duke gestured for them to sit on a nearby bench while he remained standing. You see, Lady Cordelia, our engagement has served its purpose. Your father's shipping connections have been secured through the contracts we signed last week. The marriage itself is merely a formality, one I find I am not particularly eager to endure. Cordelia struggled to comprehend his words. Are you saying you wish to end our engagement? I am saying that a marriage between us would be unnecessarily complicated, particularly given your obvious attachment to my brother. The Duke straightened his already immaculate cuffs. I shall announce that, upon further reflection, I have realized that our temperaments are ill-suited. I shall express my regret and withdraw gracefully. No scandal, no damaged reputations. The siblings stared at him in disbelief. Why would you do this? Zachary asked suspiciously. Because unlike you, brother, I am not a romantic. I sought an advantageous match, and I have secured the business arrangements I desired without the inconvenience of a wife who clearly prefers another. The Duke's gaze shifted to Cordelia. Lady Cordelia, you are an accomplished young woman with admirable composure. I believe you would have made a suitable duchess. However, I have no desire for a marriage filled with resentment and longing glances toward my brother. Cordelia scarcely dared to breathe. And my family? Their standing would not be affected. Not if we handle the matter with appropriate discretion. The Duke's lips thinned. I shall even go so far as to suggest that the decision was mutual, sparing your pride. After a suitable interval, perhaps 6 months, you may announce your engagement to Zachary without raising eyebrows. Zachary studied his brother with newfound respect. That is unexpectedly generous of you, Reginald. Do not mistake practicality for generosity, the Duke replied. A duchess who pines for another man is of no use to me. Better to make a clean break and avoid future complications. With that, he bowed slightly to Cordelia. I shall call upon your father this afternoon to discuss the dissolution of our engagement. Good day, Lady Cordelia. Zachary. As he departed, Cordelia and Zachary remained frozen in disbelief. Did that truly just happen? She whispered when the Duke's footsteps had faded. I believe it did, Zachary replied, a slow smile spreading across his face. My brother, for all his coldness, is nothing if not practical. He is releasing me, Cordelia said wonderingly. Without scandal or recrimination. He is releasing us both, Zachary corrected, taking her hands again. Cordelia, I know we must wait before making any formal announcement, but I must ask now, while my heart is too full to contain the question, will you marry me? Not for advantage or connection, but because I love you completely and cannot imagine my life without your music, your laughter, your spirit. Tears filled Cordelia's eyes as years of carefully constructed practicality crumbled away, revealing the truth she had tried to deny, that love was not merely a frivolous notion from novels but a transformative force that had awakened her to possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Yes, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. Yes, I will marry you, Zachary Harrington, for love and nothing else. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that confirmed everything she had begun to believe, that marriage could be more than a business arrangement, that her heart had known what her mind had refused to acknowledge, and that sometimes, the most practical choice of all was to choose happiness. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Cordelia Pemberton became Lady Zachary Harrington in a ceremony attended by all of London society. The Duke of Harrowmont sat in the front pew, his expression as inscrutable as ever, though those who watched closely might have noticed a certain satisfaction in his eyes as he observed his brother's obvious joy. As Cordelia and Zachary departed the church amid a shower of flower petals, she leaned close to her new husband and whispered, I believe I have developed a new philosophy about marriage. And what might that be, my love? He asked, his eyes crinkling with the smile that had first captured her heart. "That the most practical arrangement of all," she replied, "is one built on love." His laughter rang out, drawing smiles from everyone who heard it, everyone except the Duke, who merely shook his head at such unseemly display. But even he could not deny that his practical solution had resulted in something rather extraordinary, a marriage that promised to be as joyful as it was unexpected. And as their carriage pulled away from the church, Cordelia reflected that sometimes the cruelest twist of fate, like being promised to a cold duke, could lead to the greatest blessing of all, finding true love where one least expected it.